Canadians.
Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians in the former Liberal strongholds of Toronto and Montreal have now given their verdict. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. Mr. Speaker, isn't it time for Canadians to have a chance to render their verdict right across the country, electing a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
I ask members, especially members on the far side of the House, to please not to take the microphone until they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about the economy. That is because today we had good news for Canadians. Inflation is back down to where it was before COVID hit. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range this whole year. Wages have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful that for them, good news for Canadians is bad news that they want to ignore.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this incompetent finance minister would tell you that you should celebrate that after prices rising faster than at any time in 40 years, they continue to rise, just not as quickly. I'm sure the people living in tent encampments, or the record-smashing 2 million people lined up at food banks, or the 1 in 4 kids going to school hungry after 9 years of this government will be celebrating. But what we now find out is that it's worse than we thought. According to a document just released, the government's second carbon tax will cost $9 billion in lost GDP. Why won't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know why the Conservatives are so panicked about an election. It's because they can see that the economic news is good. They can see that we are now back to exactly where we were before COVID hit. They can see the Bank of Canada has lowered interest rates 3 times in a row, and wages have been ahead of inflation for 19 months. That's good news for Canadians. It's bad news for Conservatives.
And once again, I apologize. Normally, I would indicate out of respect to all members by saying the Honourable, and I forgot to do that in this case. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The bad news is we now have 1,800 homeless encampments in Ontario.
Shame.
35 in Halifax alone. 2 million Canadians lined up at food banks after 9 years of NDP Liberal government. And now that we learn that on top of the $25 billion annual hit of the first carbon tax to our GDP, the second carbon tax will subtract another $9 billion a year. Over $35 billion in lost GDP. That's almost $2,000 per family. Why won't this costly NDP Liberal government allow Canadians to vote on the carbon tax?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about housing because there is more good news Canadians should know about. And that is that we have extended to 30 years amortizations for all first-time home buyers. That means more young Canadians can buy that first home and afford that mortgage. We've extended to 30 years amortizations for all new homes. That's to encourage what we know we all need, more homes built faster. But these weak and spiteful Conservatives cannot celebrate good news for Canadians because it's bad news for their partisan interests.
Yes.
Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. This Prime Minister's new de facto finance minister, carbon tax Carney, has massive conflicts of interest, including multiple foreign investment firms. Canadians don't know how much he personally stands to profit from the advice that he's giving to the Prime Minister. It's more blatant corruption from this NDP Liberal government. So will the Prime Minister simply have carbon tax Carney sworn in as a public office holder so that the full extent of Canada's disclosure laws apply to him too?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, we do believe in listening to experts from across the country. But let's talk about where the Conservatives get their ideas. The Conservative leader gets his advice on helping Canadians with their grocery bills from a Loblaws lobbyist. He gets his advice on Ukraine from Elon Musk and from Tucker Carlson. And he has courted the support of misogynists and cozied up to the far right. Those are the advisors Canadians should be really concerned about.
The honourable member from Regina Capel has stood in this place and understands the importance of calling members to order so that those who do have the floor have the opportunity to address the House. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's absolutely absurd to hear the finance minister give anyone lessons about who they're taking advice from. Arch-liberal elitist Mark Carney. This guy has more conflicts than the twice guilty and convicted Prime Minister of their party. And they're letting carbon tax Carney keep all the money and all the power by covering up his massive conflicts of interest while giving away that finance minister's job. He makes millions from foreign investment firms, and now he's advising the Prime Minister. So why is the Prime Minister letting carbon tax Carney keep the money and the power and serving as the real finance minister?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely shameful what the Conservatives are doing. When there is a Canadian who doesn't agree with their vision for Canada, what do? Attack them. Whether it's anybody who doesn't agree with what the Conservatives do, the only thing they know how to do is denigrate that person. Mr. Speaker, we should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. We should be able to hear advice from a whole wide range of actors without attacking their character and bringing down fellow Canadians. They should be ashamed of their actions. Thank you, Mr.